like a small point. I have so much to say in too little time. The World Trade System has been disrupted by a mixture of ignorance, imbecility, arrogance, and corruption. I refer to Donald Trump in this context, and I should point out that putting a lipstick on a pig doesn't make it beautiful. There is no free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Tariffs went from 2.5% to 10%. But because they didn't go to 45%, it's been pitched as a free trade agreement. This is not a free trade agreement. The Trump administration then defends their policies by saying, look, the free traders predicted mass unemployment. It didn't happen. Therefore, they're wrong. Of course, no free trader predicted mass unemployment. The aggregate level of unemployment is not a feature of trade policy, but of macroeconomic policy. What it does is it shifts the kind of jobs that you have from high-wage jobs to lower-wage jobs, but not the total aggregate unemployment. So we're being conned over and over in this discussion. Our positions are mischaracterized, and this is Secretary of Commerce just said this. He's a particularly dishonest and not very bright person, also deeply corrupt. And he said, the free traders predicted this, it didn't happen, they're all wrong. No free trader predicted that. So I just want to be very clear what's happening right now. The world is being turned upside down. And it's being done so on the basis of a great deal of misinformation. So here's our position. The question is trade voluntary and helpful, or is it predatory? And as Donald Trump famously wrote on one of his notes, captured by a photographer's camera, the three words that characterize his mentality: trade is bad, in his own handwriting. Trade is bad. And I want to address that briefly and suggest differently. I want to run through, again, more than I have time for, but a little bit of basics about comparative advantage. So there's division of labor, that's Adam Smith's contribution. David Ricardo takes another step and talks about comparative advantage, through which we can consume more than we can produce. The paradoxical sense of what that is, I picked two random names, Diana and Tom. We have an economy of only two goods. We could make it much more complicated. There's apples and fish. And Diana is a goddess in comparison to Tom. She can do everything better. I put up here, if Tom just gathers apples in a day, all day picking apples, he can get 50. And the same for fishing. He could get 50. So his rate of substitution is 1 for 1. But Diana could get 100 apples in a day or 200 fish. She's amazing. So the question is, why would she trade with someone like Tom? In the technical language of welfare economics, Tom is referred to as a loser, right? He's a nobody. So why would Diana want to trade with a loser? Well, it turns out, imagine that they are producing in isolation. Each one had mothers who said, balanced diet, not all apples, not all fish, half and half. And so they divide their time. Tom can do 25 of each, Diana 50 and 100. Again, she's just awesome in comparison. She's here somewhere. There she is back there. Now, she comes, she's also much brighter than Tom. And she says, Tom, why don't we trade? I'll give you 37 fish for 25 of your apples. Tom's not right, but he looks at her and he says, she's a trustworthy person. I'll do it. So they switch and engage in specialization. Tom goes from 25 fish to 0 and doubles his appling, his apple gathering. She reduces by 50% her apples and increases by 50% the time allocated to fishing. So numerical ratios are constant. There's no hidden wires or tricks. And then they exchange. And here's the awesome thing. What's really awesome is they now have more for both of them. Because Diana goes from 25 apples. She now gets her 25 from Tom. She has 50. But now, sending over her 37 fish to Tom, she has 113 fish, and Tom has 37. That's more than both of them had in the absence of trade. And most people don't understand this. If you get this, you will know more than the Secretary of Commerce of the United States. By far. There's a low bar. Now, what is happening here? It's not a trick. It has to do with cost. Diana is the lowest cost producer of fish, because one fish costs her a half an apple. But for Tom, it's one apple for one fish. So she's the lowest cost producer. So producing at the lowest cost, understood as economists understand it, opportunity cost, what you give up, she can produce more. And jointly, they are now better off by the simple act of specializing in trade. Not because of innovation or technology, just something so simple. And this is something that we're now losing around the world. So I mentioned here the basics. It's about thinking about cost. And when I explain this to students, I like to give the practical example. Every one of us faces this question in our lives. Every business faces it. Do I make it or buy it? Make or buy is the fundamental question in business. And I ask that in what we're doing. Do we have a project to do this? And I say, well, are we the best people to produce it, or can we buy it from someone else rather than producing it in-house? That's a business question. And it permeates all of our lives. I could make my own clothes. By the way, I made this, obviously. No, I didn't make this. I'm not that clever. I bought it from someone else who can produce it at much lower cost. So some of the implications, there are gains from trade internationally. These are very important. But they have to do with something even deeper. And this is comparative advantage is awesome. It's an amazing engine for improving the world, and it makes possible human society. In the absence of this, we would be enemies. But now we can be mutually beneficial to one another through division of labor, which gets you part of the way, and then through comparative advantage. Human beings can be beneficial to each other rather than competitors, rivals for a small fish pie. Now, the other point to deal with is most people believe in the zero-sum model of the world. This is common. The average person thinks this. If you gain, then I had to lose. You cheated me somehow. You're better off. I must be worse off. Well, the sum of the gains equaling to zero, that's a common view. These gains are almost non-existent. They very rarely happen. There are some occasions you can find a real zero-sum gain. But most gains, when there's a negative, are negative-sum gains. Robbers, for instance, gain something. They would gain about 80 euros in my pocket. If a Deirdre were to smack me on the head and steal my money, she'd get 80. But she would hit me so hard, I'd probably have a hospital bill of another 200. So there's a 280 loss for me and an 80 gain for her. It's a negative sum. All gains involving violence, war, and so on are negative sum gains. The total of the losses is much greater than the gains to those people who perpetrate these crimes. But then, of course, we have the positive sum gains. This is indicated, as my friend John Stoss put it, by the double thank you. I go into the store, I buy something, they give it to me, I say I thank you for it. And then the weirdest thing, the merchant says thank you. That's weird. Because normally when I say thank you, the other person says you're welcome. So if I stumble off here and Jean-Claude helps me get up, I say thank you after I've been injured. It would be weird if he said, no, Tom, thank you. Right? There was something wrong about that. But in exchange, we both say thank you. That's a clue. We're both gaining from this exchange. And many people simply can't understand that. So we need to transfer negative sum gains, war and violence, into positive sum gains. Those are trade and mutually beneficial exchange. Now, a few things I want to deal with very quickly. The imbecility of the discussions of trade deficits. Wilbur Ross, who was the former Secretary of Commerce under Donald Trump, said, everybody knows imports subtract from GDP. They're a net loss when you import. And this we hear over and over and over. Imports are harmful to us. Well, let's look at a little bit of accounting. He says we're losing money when we import. Donald Trump says this. Every time the U.S. has a trade deficit with Canada, we're losing money, and he keeps saying we've subsidized them. Why? Every dollar made in profit by someone else in exchange with me is my subsidy to that person. That's his perspective. And as he says, all our money is in China. I want it back. And I always say, well, do I have to give them back the stuff I bought from them now? Do I have to send them back my clothes and my various other products? Because he wants my money back, do I have to send them that back? No, that's not discussed. Well, let's look at the accounting identity. So some trade algebra. So gross domestic product is equal to consumption plus government expenditure plus investment plus exports minus imports. This is where they make the mistake. Wilbur Ross says, see that minus imports? See that? Imports are subtracting from GDP. That's why imports are bad. He thinks this is an equation of economic growth. It's an accounting identity. It's a very different thing. Well, do a little bit of algebra. Y, or GDP, minus C minus G minus I equals exports minus imports. Another way to then transform it. When we add these various things up with regard to taxation. And then we have savings, private sector plus savings in the government sector, which we don't see very much anymore, minus imports equals export, minus investment, pardon me, equals exports minus imports. It tells you if you're investing more than you're saving, you're importing more than you're exporting, because you're importing capital. So when Donald Trump says, it's good, I want them to invest in my country, he wants a capital account surplus, it's the same as having a deficit on the trade side. And he doesn't get it. None of these people understand this. So in fact, what's driving the trade deficit is investment. It's not the other way around. It's the willingness to invest in assets that is a fundamental feature in driving the trade deficit. You can't have what they claim they want. Everyone investing in your country and then having an export surplus. This doesn't make any sense. But it's a little complicated for the average politician to deal with. So, trade deficits are not losing money. Then I want to turn, because in the limited time, and address the question of peace. The data are overwhelming that what the 19th century liberals said is verified. Frédéric Bastiat was a free trader. Why? Because he wanted to increase the number of pencils. Well, that's a nice thing, but for the purpose of peace. Frédéric Passy, the first winner of the Nobel Prize, what did he get it for? For being a nice person and a peacenik. He got it for being a free trade advocate and championing the cause of free trade. So the first Nobel Prize winner, a great French economist, Frédéric Passy, and what he wrote on this was so powerful and so beautiful and so important. Richard Compton, also, why free trade? Peace, 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 peace. And John Prince Smith, the great advocate of free trade in the Reichstag, who was hated by Bismarck, as you could imagine. Bismarck hated traders. He hated the English. He said it's a nation of shopkeepers, as opposed to landed holders of estates and militarists and so on. They understood it's about peace. It makes possible not only coexistence, but each nation being beneficial to the other. Now let's look at the data. Aaron Gartsky has looked at this extensively. We know that there's a relationship, what he calls the capitalist peace. There's a democratic peace. We're well acquainted with this in international relations. Democracies tend not to go to war with one another. But when he disaggregated the data, he said, what's doing the work? Yes, democracy is a very important thing. But what does the work is trade. When you did try to disaggregate the data, it's trade. And other studies that show that merely increasing the volume of trade between countries diminishes the likelihood of military conflict between them. Now, Patrick McDonald, in his major study of this question, added something very important. It's not just trade per se, it's the nature of the trade. Trade between private parties drives peace, but trade among states does not. That's a very important book. He has a great book from Cambridge University Press where he makes this case, which is why we can see why Vladimir Putin is such an aggressive person on the international stage. Because what does Russia export? State-owned products, almost exclusively. Almost all Russian exports are from state firms. He's renationalized virtually everything. Now that they're killing off the rest of the oligarchs, they're nationalizing more industries. But oil, gas, and minerals, these are the really big things. All of them belong to one man, Vladimir Putin. And he's willing to sacrifice a lot in order to conquer territory. Private traders have very different perspectives on this. So the relationship of trade among private parties is what drives peace. And then I'll conclude with just an anecdote. This has been known for a long time. I read the Iliad and the Odyssey 3 different times in my life, just start to finish, when I was a boy, and then when I was in university, and then I was badly injured. About 24 years ago, I was paralyzed for some time and couldn't walk, so from my legs. So I used to spend a lot of time in agony in a bed. What are you going to do? Reread Homer and other books of that sort, and Virgil and so on, to avoid the agony. And there was a passage that almost jumped off the page at me. Not, as Donald Trump would say, literally jumped off the page, because he didn't do that, but it metaphorically jumped off the page at me. And that is when Odysseus and his men are marooned on the island of the Cyclops. This great story. Odysseus wants to go home to his wife, to Penelope, who's dealing with the suitors and so on. And they're marooned, and the Cyclops is there, and he's not very nice. He attacks them, and he eats some of the sailors, kills them, slaughters them, and eats them. And Odysseus says, "What is my guest gift?" Because Zeus is the god of strangers. He sees everything, and you're expected to be hospitable to someone who washes up on your island. It might happen to you. And Zeus will see. And he says, "What is my guest gift?" The gift you would give to someone in this circumstance. And the Cyclops says, "I'll eat you last," which is on the ranking of guest gifts quite low. And then Homer asks, why is the Cyclops a savage? It says, "For the Cyclops have no ships with crimson prows, no shipwrights there to build them good strong craft, to take them out to sea to trade as other men do." The Cyclops is a savage because he doesn't trade. It's trade that civilizes us and converts us from savages into